Whether or not you're a gambling person, beginner's luck is a thing. I recall playing some family poker, and my adopted niece, Sue, who was in her early teens at the time, learned how to play poker for the first time, and she routed the family table. Now, we weren't exactly poker superstars or high rollers, but she had literally just learned the game. She obviously didn't have any strategy at hand, and she just kept getting the cards. Trips, full house, a quad at one point. She was unstoppable. And especially experienced gamblers will tell you that luck comes and goes in streaks. And there really is such a thing as beginner's luck. My own little piece of beginner's luck was posting short story on Medium, the blogging post, back in June of 2018. I had something of a career train wreck and its own midlife crisis style epiphany, which I'll go into probably in another podcast. But suffice to say, I was back into writing, which has been near and dear to my heart for decades. And inspired by my life partner at the time, I wrote about my first marriage. And it was a hit. So far, 2,200 likes, dozens and dozens of comments, over 20,000 reads. I hit the ground running in the blogosphere, and then I thought it was easy. Well, I've had a few hits since then, and I don't write necessarily to go viral or even mini viral, but this story hit a chord, and I'd like to read it to you today. It brings back the memories for sure. And it also inspires me to pursue this as a fictionalized Romana Clay style narrative. I'm wrapping up my second book now, science fiction. I've been kicking the can down the road, moving the goalposts on the publication date, but I'm getting ripe. I'm almost there. And whenever I am about to finish a big writing project, creative project, I always think about what I'm going to do next. And I think after the sci-fi book launches, I will switch gears and transform this short story, which I'll share with you in just a second, into its own novel. But this account is not fictionalized. This story is based on a true story, my story, the story of my sexless marriage, of which there are actually two parts. You are so lucky, this being the first. Hello, and welcome to the No Hair, All Heart podcast. I am your host, Mookie Spitz, the one with no hair, and the heart today will be the story of my sexless marriage from Sperm Bank to vasectomy. Ready? Deep down, I knew my wife would never have sex with me, but I was married, so had nothing to lose. We'd play the same predictable game each week, me asking, her rejecting. Having a headache couldn't work forever, so her denials became increasingly creative and conditional, leading to a series of excuses progressively more obnoxious and absurd. At first, she refused to make love because our apartment was too messy. We had two young boys reminding me we'd done it at least 2 times before, infusing me with false hope. Worse still, by the time I cleaned one room, the kids messed up another. Noticing my strange obsession with tidiness, so out of character, They deliberately sabotaged my efforts to ensure Dad never got laid. After I finally managed to clean up, my wife's next excuse was our bed. Was it too small? No. Was it too big? No. Was it too soft, too hard, too high, too low? No, 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 no. Then what, for Christ's sakes? She couldn't or wouldn't say. She simply didn't like our bed. So, of course, we bought a new one. Was it any different from the one we got rid of? I couldn't tell. Neither could she, apparently, because she still wouldn't put out. Her excuse next round? The bed replaced, the room clean. She suddenly didn't like our bedroom. So we rearranged the whole goddamn apartment to suit her. Every permutation explored, our furnishings were moved between dining room, living room, kids' room, and bedroom. We exhausted every possibility until she finally sighed. The neighbors below wondering what the F was going on above all the moving furniture. Okay, now what? The whole apartment had to go, of course. We lived in a second floor walk up, and carrying groceries up and down those steps apparently wrecked her. The only way I'd ever get any, she insisted, or at least hinted, was if we relocated to a first floor space where the stairs wouldn't tire her out. Packing and moving one or several more blissfully sexless months. The switch perked her up, but the happier she got, the less inclined she remained. I had done everything she'd asked, no matter how ridiculous, and her excuses were starting to run out. Amazing how otherwise unimaginative people instantly become creative to avoid doing what they don't like. Necessity, indeed, the mother of invention, or in this case, the engine of marital misery. So she cunningly shifted from domesticity to biology in her excuses, terrified of getting pregnant again, or so she claimed. Birth control pills upset her. Condoms could break. Other planning methods proved too risky. Our only solution was to indefinitely forego sexual intercourse. Maybe we could have sex again after the kids went to college, she explained, when she became menopausal and I finally gave up. Biomechanics might have had something to do with it. I'm a 6'2", 220-pound white guy. She was a 5'0" Korean woman who's less than half my body weight. Actually, a lot less, closer to 100 pounds, maybe even 90, 95. Sympathetic friends said we looked cute together, while imagining a Great Dane screwing a Chihuahua. Our kids came out adorable, though, one tall and the other short. Who knew? Now, before you dismiss me as another sexist male, Neanderthal chauvinist, or pre-Me Too asshole, allow me to assert that back in the day, I tried. I really did. Flowers, date nights, candlelit dinners, breakfasts in bed, home improvement projects, investment plans, shopping sprees, Louis Vuitton bags, kid sitting weekends. Was I an awesome husband? Time magazine, father of the year? No. Was I an abusive prick? Nope, not by any stretch either. Her Korean stepmom would agree. One summer, early in our hopeless marriage, I flew Granny in to meet the kids, hang out, and nibble on freeze-dried grasshoppers, which she brought in this cellophane bag, which she opened and put in little plates, and which she nibbled on alongside her kimchi at every meal. She was a sweet old lady who didn't speak any English and looked like Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin after he sobered out. Recovering from the initial shock of meeting her new American son-in-law, she earnestly tried to help our marriage. Part of her arsenal consisted of a pair of interlocking wooden ducks, strategically placed on the nightstand of our postpartum bed. The duck's orientation was traditionally used by a wife to convey whether or not she was in the mood. If the wooden ducks faced away from each other, then the husband wouldn't be getting any that night. And conversely, if the ducks faced each other, the wife was, well, she was ready to romp, or at least willing to indulge her husband's fancies. After a week, not only were the ducks chronically facing away from each other, they disappeared altogether. What happened to the ducks? I asked too loudly one night, our 2-year-old shouting from the other room, "Fuck duck, daddy suck, good luck." Like a parakeet. How did this kid even hear? How do you figure it out? What did he really understand? Either way, that was the end of that. If a sympathetic grandma and R-rated toddler couldn't wind her back up again, nobody could. She stayed in our marriage because I took care of her. She didn't work, had no intention of ever doing so. Her basic needs were met, including zero intimacy. I stayed because I loved our kids, and our kids loved their mom. She correctly surmised that I wouldn't leave her because I wouldn't leave them. I didn't want to shatter this otherwise pristine and beautiful family experience, at least through the lens of our children. All she had to do was continue ovulating and say no with ever more exotic excuses, and all I had to do was deal with it. Some relationships evolve over time, others inexorably return to how they began. When we first met, I was horny and she needed a green card. A blind date, I felt lust at first sight. The cutest woman I'd ever seen. Seriously. She saw me as a big goofy oaf who'd do just about anything to get laid. We were both right. I quickly got what I wanted, and she eventually got what she needed. Only 2 weeks in and resolutely resisting my attempts, she somehow agreed to don a Valentine's Day form-fitting nightie, worn awkwardly as if the pink silk lace were a burqa. We smoked weed, which made her skittishly paranoid, but distracted enough to succumb to my ham-fisted and ham-handed advances. Getting instantly knocked up sealed our fate, closing the gates soon as they were opened. Unable to sue Victoria's Secrets for paternity and unwilling to get an abortion, we found ourselves all in. I was 37 at the time and happily single, but felt a higher power somehow got involved. My time had come to settle down. I did the wrong thing for all the right reasons, a pattern that continued throughout our tortuous decade-long marriage. Her yin stubbornly resisting my yang every step of the way. We were set up by the receptionist of the Sperm Bank where I worked as a medical editor, writing clinical manuals on semen analysis. True story. Men would check in, enter a room to the side of the office, watch porn videos or flip through back issues of Penthouse magazine, then jerk off into a small plastic container, which they'd place on a small ledge facing the laboratory. I got the gig through the editor of a local paper who offered me up as a favor to her best friend, a tall, slender woman who flew around the world electro-ejaculating rhinoceroses. Also, true facts. An endangered species, they needed all the help they could get. Her sample extraction was more elaborate than the guys in our lab. She wore arm-length rubber gloves to zap rhino prostate from the inside. She proved far more adept at jerking off rhinos than writing research papers, which is where I came in. After several excruciating drafts, we couldn't stand working with each other. But I stuck around thanks to the rapport built up with her lab mate and colleague, a Dr. J, who was a Sri Lankan emigre who wore terrible toupees and had the knack for getting high-strung white people impregnated. In between rhino citations, I edited the doc's correspondence, convincing him that I could help him realize one of his many dreams: getting published with Cambridge Press. The acclaimed institution had too few books about sperm, and luckily the professor stumbled onto the right guy for the right job. Leaning against a liquid nitrogen tank, he dictated Semen Analysis, a practical guide. As I edited our magnum spermus on an old PC, his Filipino clinician took freshly filled sample containers, smeared loads onto a slide, squinted through a microscope, and tapped on a clicker device once for every 10 sperm cells counted. Mixing up gender pronouns, she told me about her many family trips to Vegas, her chip girl niece, and plans for retiring on the strip. Click, clack, went the counter. One random weekday, Maria, the receptionist, handed me a business card from Barbie Nail Salon on Pulaski Avenue there in Chicago. On the back was a handwritten email address. Yippee is a cute girl new to this country who wants to be taken out, Maria hinted. I promised her you were a gentleman and would take her out to fun places. Demonstrably underqualified, I emailed her anyway. We agreed to meet the following Sunday evening at a coffee shop. I spent the afternoon in a bar with a friend and arrived late and somewhat buzzed. I saw two Asian women in the Starbucks, one striking, the other ready to strike. I had to guess who was my date, who was her protective escort. I guessed correctly, but they lied. So for the rest of the evening, I flirted with my future ex-wife's chaperone, and we got along great. Second date, with the three of us, they let the cat out of the bag. I was excited she was the more attractive of the pair, yet disappointed since I'd grown fond of her escort. Only after our sixth date or so, the three of us going out, were they comfortable enough to allow alone time with me and Yippee. Despite the chivalrous chaperoning, our first night out, we wound up at my place doing drugs, getting naked, and having unprotected sex. The frivolity of our fling was instantly torpedoed by knocking her up, further complicated by her precarious immigration status. Drastic action had to be taken. 8.5 months pregnant later, I rolled her into the county courthouse to get legally married. The judge, bailiffs, witnesses, everyone laughed out loud as we stood there. Go ahead and Google interracial shotgun wedding, and you'll probably see a website pop up with our photo. Or better yet, put it into ChatGPT and watch the image self-generate. What began as a lusty look across a coffee house rapidly accelerated into a life-changing relationship. The only child of toxic parents, I had spent my adulthood avoiding marriage with the same gusto I resisted a career, and largely for the same reasons. My nuclear family having nuked my youth, the last thing I wanted was to dive back into the pain I spent decades fleeing. A serial monogamist and chronic dumper, I'd recklessly fall in love and commit to a romance just long enough for the endorphins to dissipate and the challenges to mount. I then invent excuses and walk away with impunity, rationalizing my mate's anguish with the callous assertion that I was honest and open from the start, claiming to have never been in it to really win it. Sooner or later, though, something had to give. Was I running away from what I feared or running toward my idea of a better life? Scientists have speculated for millennia as to what happens if an infinite force impacts an immovable body. Are they both destroyed, or is all that power transformed into a weird object that's strangely moving and staying still at the same time? A sudden unwanted pregnancy with a stranger I had nothing in common with somehow triggered the need for a genuine relationship. For years, I adamantly refused to play ball with Freud, my infantilism finally surrendering to a warped, interracial Oedipus complex. Darwin also kicked my ass, the forces of natural selection transforming fun single sex eventually into grim marital death. Although our vast differences in background, religion, just about every criteria you can imagine or categorize didn't bode well for a long-term relationship, the unlikely union was certainly promising in terms of what in animal husbandry is called hybrid vigor. Every two people on Earth can eventually be traced back to the same parents. Bedouins might be only 40 years apart from each other in terms of sharing that nuclear family. Yippee and my ancestors likely hadn't shared a cave for what? 40,000, 50,000 or more years? That results in vigorous gene mixing and robust offspring, an evolutionary advantage, no doubt. Scientists also describe genetic drift, whereby isolated pockets of humanity fight disease by occasionally intermingling DNA due to the sexual allure of strangers who have different physical traits. Does it sound like I'm rationalizing an otherwise terrible marriage? Sure, but that ship has long sailed. Being white, I unconsciously assumed an Asian woman was submissive. And being Asian, she consciously knew such an assumption gave her complete control. Being male, I didn't look beyond getting laid. Being female, she instinctively understood our entire situation. Fast forward 5 years, 2 kids, zero sex, and infinite excuses later, Freud and Darwin had officially left the building. Getting a vasectomy was my idea. Although that sounds naive and optimistic, for the first time I was thinking endgame and how, sterilized like a feral cat, I'd again be able to irresponsibly have sex with other people. Either way, she couldn't have cared less. She rejoiced in a fuckless future for us. Shooting blanks made absolutely no difference to her. My balls were in my court alone. I did some research, looked up doctors in network. Of all the nearby physicians, Dr. Jeffrey Spitz immediately stood out, a seasoned testicle snipping pro with terrific creds. Was he a relative? Not that I knew of. Spitz is a relatively rare last name, but not to the extent we were all closely related. I considered our shared family name as a sign. At least I'd be in good hands, so to speak. In German, spitz means tip or point. That's why a ballpoint pen is a Spitzblume. A pointy-nosed dog breed is a Spitz. The city of highest latitude in the world is called Spitzbergen, and why crowds of German sports fans cheer "Das ist Spitze" when their team scores, the equivalent of yelling "Hurrah!" or literally "That's the top." Now, as an aside, Spitzname means nickname, by the way, and I'm not sure why. You can maybe help me out with that. Anyway, the irony of Dr. Spitz snipping my Spitz tip wasn't lost to me, or the hope that our familial bromancing would offer extra protection for the family jewels. Dr. Jeffrey Spitz might feel a special bond with Mookie Spitz, who was freaked out that his genitalia would soon be sliced and diced by a complete stranger, like his wife, who'd done even more damage by avoiding them. Perfunctory introductions aside, Dr. Spitz was indeed amused by our shared surname. A brief exercise in personal history, check. Perfunctory introductions aside, Dr. Spitz was indeed amused by our shared surname. A brief exercise in personal history and ancestry 101, nonetheless yielding few clues. Both of us were from Chicago, it turned out, which thickened the plot. But his father had died in a motorcycle accident at a relatively young age, his mother remarrying, making tracing anything deeper entirely speculative. An expert in vasectomy reversal, Dr. Spitz also seemed overqualified, at least for me. I kept us focused on the matter at hand, which he promised wouldn't be nearly as traumatic as I envisioned. A buxom blonde nurse confirmed his assurances, at least initially, when she shaved and rubbed disinfectant all over my dick and balls. She made small talk as she worked, which I didn't take personally. A satisfying start yielded to piercing pain. Shots of anesthesia were local and excruciating. Since I likely wasn't going to get laid at home anyway, the futility of the pointless procedure hit home. I had spent years spinelessly acquiescing to the whims of a mean-spirited crazy person, and now my legs were spread wide with the delusional hope she'd someday open hers. The anesthesia mercifully conquered my adrenaline and the pain subsided, giving way to a groggy, euphoric buzz. A seasoned pro, Dr. Spitz quickly got to it, opened me up, and reached right in, prodding, pinching, and pulling. Still conscious, I distinctly heard his scissors snipping, my tubes cauterized, closed, with a burning tss sound, and I smelled the smoke as it rose to my nostrils. Sterilized and in my moment of greatest discomfort, for the first time I noticed the music that was being pumped into the operating room. Designed to soothe, distract, I instead shuddered in shock and awe. Clocks by Coldplay was streaming, and I was screaming. I hate Coldplay. Not your usual impulsive turn of the dial, but a passionate revulsion to the worst band ever formed. Monotonal whining, soulless songwriting. How would these four effete British arseholes fake their way into international stardom? To me, Coldplay is the string theory of pop music, a train wreck stifling creativity for generations. In my day, Led Zeppelin was denounced by old farts as trash. But what did they know? I was getting a vasectomy, but Chris Martin never had any balls. The lights go out and I can't be saved. I'm not even going to try to sing this shit. The lights go out and I can't be saved. Tides that I tried to swim against have brought me down upon my knees. Oh, I beg and plead. Oh my God, who listens to this shit? Answer? Every fucking body. I've met cool people only to discover they like Coldplay. The cognitive dissonance, disorienting. These people then dead to me. By association, I now hated Dr. Spitz and his hot nurse, too. Whether a byproduct of the powerful drugs, physical discomfort, or the dismal reality that I was force fed Coldplay while being sterilized, I gazed upward into the bright light and experienced a terrifying vision. Serenaded by the whimpering emo vocals and boring piano arpeggio was a circle of faces staring down at me, their fingers pointed in accusation and mockery. I recognized them all and remembered the ignominious circumstances of our partings, from one night stands to year long relationships, from punch me in the mouth breakups to eternal sunshine of the spotless mind memory deletions. These were the living ghosts of everyone I had ever ghosted, and they had me where they always wanted me, lying prostrate below, my prostate literally dangling out. They taunted and teased me with elaborate coordination as if they'd been rehearsing together for years. I got the feeling they'd compared notes, my foibles pantomimed with precise skill and insulting exaggeration. They snored like hibernating bears, humped like bonobos, masturbated like chimpanzees, did housework like tree sloths, and let me have it like black widows. Glaringly absent was my wife, for whom this entire unnerving procedure was meant. She wasn't even in the waiting room, having dropped me off to go shopping with her friends. I asked her to pick up over the counter meds the doc recommended for post op discomfort. Not only did she forget to stop by the pharmacy, she forgot to come get me. I had to call her, writhing in pain. Finally, we played it all out. I cleaned up, bought a new bed, moved rooms, then apartments, got a vasectomy. I healed a month later and made my move. No, she snapped. Why? I foolishly asked. Because I don't want to have sex with you, she admitted, both of us greatly relieved. Sooner or later, the truth comes out and life catches up. You just have to give it some time. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Revisiting this story, I am highly entertained. What I have discovered in one of my personal missions in life is to let go of any kind of resentment. We are always being wronged in some way, and everyone's got a story about their life and everyone else's. And our life now is busy, and our life moving forward is limited and getting more and more brief. So why bother holding a grudge? Just keep moving forward and cherish your memories, good, bad, and ugly. It's simply the shit that happens to you. And don't take it personal. Maybe learn a thing or two. And if you are of the artistic persuasion or perversion, translate your feelings, translate these experiences, these memories into some form of art. Write a song, this case, write a short story. And moving forward, as I mentioned at the beginning of this pod, turn it into a book. So, to help facilitate even that, I have part two of this story. And that is already written and published, and it was almost as successful as part one. I believe, over 15,000 readers, at least as many comments. And I am eager to revisit that in my next No Hair, All Heart pod. So I hope you enjoyed this story. I hope also that you found it relatable, either in the sense that you're happy that your own marriage or relationship isn't this dysfunctional, or if you too are in a sexless marriage or coupling, then let it be your own kind of catharsis. After I wrote this story, I had a coworker come up to me at the job, and I'm not quite sure how he saw it. Maybe because I had posted it on Facebook, and presumably I was Facebook friends with this colleague. He had read it, and maybe a few weeks after it had gone live, randomly, just out of nowhere, I'm sitting at my desk working. And he comes up to me, pats me on the back, and awkward. We had never really spoken, even casually. We had been on several business trips and presentations. We both had fairly senior roles in the organization, but we were in different departments. And it was always cordial and professional, but never, ever overlapping even into small talk. So this guy was just a colleague, and we had never really even fist pumped in the lobby. So he rubs my shoulder, leans in, and says something like, I can't wait to write a story about my sexless marriage. And I look at him and he looks at me and we both laugh a little bit awkwardly. But there we were, showing the ultimate vulnerability and just kind of grinning. And I felt that I was a bit of a trailblazer. I had opened up the lid, so to speak, for what many people hide. They're not ones to share the tale of their sexless marriage, even if it was a former marriage, even if it was years ago publicly. I had done so, as is my oversharing tendency, is evinced by these podcasts and my blogs. I like to just share. I wear my vulnerability on my sleeves. I like self-deprecating humor. That's perhaps the fuel of it. But I also feel that it creates a new baseline for communication. And I don't feel judged, or if I am judged, I don't really care because I'm just convinced, and I think accurately so, that most people just care about themselves anyway. You could be a Nobel Prize winner or a billionaire, or you could be a homeless person begging for change. People will judge you either way, but the mental image or construct of you is just an avatar in their head, and it's fleeting as that. So who cares? Just let it out. The catharsis alone is therapeutic, and perhaps, maybe, it might trigger a brief conversation, if not little interlude, between two people who would otherwise never speak to each other, sharing within that random moment the most personal, vulnerable, and achingly awful of feelings, being rejected by your life partner. And it was okay. It wasn't just okay, but it was therapeutic. It was like a holy space had formed around us. It was a mutual epiphany of need, but most significantly, one of release. And for that alone, I am thankful for this piece. I might have had the beginner's luck of my first blog post was the one that really went viral. And as I mentioned, I've had a few others, and I've since gone to rant on TikTok, and I had a few viral videos there. But I honestly really don't give a shit. I could have 10,000 people listen to this podcast or nobody. And I'm doing it with equal enthusiasm because I just like to tell stories. And that said, if this story does resonate for anyone, it leads to another story, like this little coda that I'm sharing with you with this colleague. So there you have it. My motivation is just to share for sharing's sake. It's not to hold a grudge, but it's to lavish oneself with one's own experiences, one's own history, regardless of the vector of its happiness or sadness, and just revel in this crazy life that we all live, where expectations often lead to disappointment, and where simply letting go is the doorway to a truly blissful happiness that, at least for me, is centered around telling stories. And the more cringy and funny, to me, the better. So thanks again for listening. I am going to follow up soon with part 2 of the story of my sexless marriage, where we go from Sperm Bank to vasectomy to the next chapter of being horny and heartbroken.